gust of 81 measured.
Oh wow, we got it's on the ground. Just right up.
It's on the ground. It's on the ground, a half mile northeast of us. We're gonna stop here for a second. We're getting 80-mile-an-hour wind gusts, 81 miles an hour.
Okay, a power flash.
Saw a power flash. I'm gonna move up a little. Yeah, there's a bigger debris cloud now.
Yeah, half a mile to our east.
Is that camera on it?
Yes.
Okay.
What so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose stripes
We're getting sustained winds of 69.
stars through the perilous fight. For the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets ran low, the bombs burst in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave
Oh, we got a picture of it.
o'er the land
Well, let's see what this road looks like first.
and the home of the
I say we go north. Let's go north. Yeah, I don't want to get.
Disaster strikes somewhere in
Now,
our
here's
country
another
every
thing you're
year.
not going to want to hear.
That's more than 50
At some
disasters
point,
every day.
no.
Some are major, like Hurricane Camille. I witnessed this awesome destruction, but Hurricane Camille, and even the greatest natural disaster we could imagine, would be dwarfed by the loss of lives and property in a nuclear attack. I'm saying this because I have good reason to be concerned. My name is John Davis, and I am the National Director of Civil Defense in Washington, D.C. Our purpose in civil defense is to protect you and to help you protect yourself in time of emergency. That's the reason we have prepared this special film, to tell you what actions you should take to help protect yourself and your family in case of a nuclear attack. The protective actions you take today would not be wasted if a nuclear attack did not occur. Experience tells us that these actions save many lives in natural disasters and other emergencies. The surest way to invite disaster is to do nothing to avoid it. You'll give this film your closest attention.
Most likely, the most important fact in the world today is this. We've been living in the atomic age since 1945. It's a long time now. And none of the catastrophes so freely predicted, so honestly feared, have come to pass. True, there have been dangerous moments like the Berlin and Cuban crises, but so far sanity has prevailed, and hopefully it always will. And yet there's no point in looking away from reality. We live in a troubled and uncertain world, and it's apt to go on being troubled for a long time to come. The nuclear genie is out of the bottle. And until the world finds a way to clap him back in and then put a lock on the stopper, there'll always remain the outside chance that what our nation and a great many others have been working so hard to avoid could conceivably happen after all. And of course, so long as even the slightest possibility exists, it's something we must reckon with. guard against, prepare for, just as a common sense precaution. So let's talk a little about these things, about what's being done to protect you, and about what you can do to protect yourself in time of emergency. Of course, our first and strongest line of defense lies in what the strategists call the power of deterrence. In our intercontinental missiles, our nuclear submarine fleet, strategic air command, in the ability of all our military forces to retaliate, even after a surprise attack, and do it with such enormous force that the aggressor would be defeated, most likely destroyed. And in that fact, that knowledge alone, lies the strongest incentive any enemy could have to avoid launching a nuclear war. But behind the sword, there's also a shield. Very quietly, but steadily over the years, we've been building a nationwide system of civil defense designed to save lives, to protect as many of our people as possible. It consists of many things. The National Warning System, tied in with NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command, able to alert the whole nation in a matter of minutes. A monitoring network with more than 65,000 locations to measure and report fallout radiation. And most important, a very large and growing public shelter system to protect us from that radiation. Local governments have been making detailed plans to deal with all kinds of disasters. An emergency broadcast system, organized to keep you informed, and thousands of special emergency control centers to direct life-saving and recovery operations. In short, if attack ever threatened, there'd be help available from many sources. You would not be alone. But a lot, inevitably, would depend on you. There's no point in denying or trying to minimize the grim fact that a nuclear attack would take a heavy toll of lives. But in all the Defense Department studies, and there have been many of them, two things come clear. Even under heaviest attack, our nation could, in fact, would survive. And our losses would be much less, your own chances of survival much greater, if each of us would take time to do just three things. First, understand the dangers you'd face. Second, make some fairly simple preparations to meet them. And third, learn exactly what to do if emergency comes, and then do it. 1, 2, 3. Now, about those dangers. There are some you can't do much about, but others you can. And knowing the distinction between the two could very well mean the difference between staying alive or dying an utterly useless death. When a thermonuclear weapon explodes, 4 things happen. First, a brilliant white flash of light. Then, a searing wave of heat shooting out from the nuclear fireball. The blast wave hurling debris before it. But even under heavy enemy attack, only 4 or 5% of our land, 1/20th of the country, would be affected at all by blast and heat. All the rest and all the tens of millions of people in it would escape untouched, except by radioactive fallout. It could spread on the winds to cover not just 5%, but 80 or 90% of our country. But that's one danger you can do something about, if you know a few facts about fallout. When a nuclear weapon explodes anywhere near the ground, tons of dirt and debris are pulverized into millions of tiny particles, swept up into the fireball, turned dangerously radioactive. They drift downwind in the mushroom cloud, then start slowly falling back to Earth. The heaviest and most dangerous particles first, after 15 to 30 minutes in the area nearest the explosion. The lighter ones later, perhaps hours or days later, and hundreds of miles away, wherever the winds may take them. But wherever they fall, in fields and streams, on rooftops, or in the streets, they spell danger. Each one of these fallout particles, no larger than grains of salt or fine sand, is like a tiny X-ray machine, shooting out deadly, invisible gamma rays that can damage or destroy the cells of your body. Too large a dose in too short a time means sickness or death. But it's a useless way to die. Useless because it's unnecessary if you use the three defenses you have against it. One is time. The most dangerous period would be the first 24 hours after fallout arrives. But fortunately, radiation decays very rapidly. It's like an elevator going down fast. For example, if all the fallout were down on the ground 1 hour after the burst, then by 7 hours, the radiation would have dropped to just 10% of that 1 hour level. By the end of 2 days, it would be down to 1%. And in 2 weeks, it would be just 1/10 of 1%. In short, with shelter, you can wait it out. But while you're waiting, you'll need protection. And that comes from two things: mass and distance. Mass, meaning thick, heavy, dense materials. Concrete, steel, even ordinary earth, to absorb or deflect those deadly gamma rays, reduce the amount of radiation reaching you. And distance, because the farther you are from the source of the radiation, fallout particles settled on the roof or on the ground outside, the safer you'll be. Put those two together, mass and distance, and you've got a fallout shelter. You'll find it wherever you see this sign, the black and yellow sign that marks our community fallout shelters. And they could mean the difference between life and death in time of emergency. Of course, if you're convinced of the futility of it all, and you want to just stand out there and bare your breast to radiation, that happens to be your privilege. But as we all found out in the Cuban crisis, that kind of talk becomes just talk. As the real danger mounted, so did our will for survival. We all discovered a reason for living: ourselves, our families, our children, and we were all looking for shelter. Well, it's there now, ready for use. A nationwide system of more than 100,000 large public fallout shelters located in office buildings, apartments, schools, factories, stores. And it's a good idea to look around, to know at all times where the nearest ones are, just in case they ever prove needed. Of course, there's still not enough, and they're not everywhere. Usually, there's plenty of fallout shelter downtown where most people work, but less in the suburbs where a lot of us live, and not nearly enough out in the country where there aren't enough buildings of heavy construction. If that's the problem, if you're just too far away from the nearest community shelter to reach it in time, then you'd better do something about it. One answer may lie in your own home. If the house has a basement, earth and concrete may give you some shielding already built in. And to help fill in the gaps, the Office of Civil Defense has been conducting home surveys in many of our states, asking each homeowner to fill out a questionnaire, then telling him by means of computer exactly how much fallout protection is already there. If you've already taken part in one of these surveys, you already know if your house has enough. And if it hasn't, well, usually all it takes to improve it, to build a home shelter in your basement, is some do-it-yourself effort, plus a couple of $100 at most for concrete block and other materials. And in extreme emergency, if crisis seems imminent and no shelters available, it's still possible to improvise some last-minute protection against fallout. Not as good as you'd find in a regular shelter, but any protection's better than none, and it could be enough to save your life. Remember, use mass and distance to reduce radiation. Choose the corner of your basement that's most below ground level. Set up a sturdy table or workbench there. Wall it in with the heaviest materials you can find: bookcases, chests of drawers, appliances, trunks. Then, fill the drawers with earth or sand to give added protection. Cover the top with as much heavy shielding as it will hold: house doors, bricks, flagstones, firewood. Then, once your family's all inside, block up the entrance, leaving an opening at the top just large enough to let air in, of course. If you live in the country and your home lacks a basement, a storm cellar outside can serve just as well. If the existing roof is made of light wood, put in extra posts and braces to support the added weight. Then cover the roof with a foot or more of earth to give you solid protection. After everyone's inside, use bricks, sandbags, or heavy concrete blocks to wall up the entrance, leaving just a few inches open at the top, again for ventilation. Or you can improvise a shelter in your yard. Dig an L-shaped trench, 4 feet deep and 3 feet wide. Make the longer side of the L big enough to accommodate your family. The other leg will serve as an entranceway and help reduce the amount of radiation getting into the shelter area. Shore up the sides of the trench for safety. Then cover it with house doors and heavy timbers. Then pile on a foot of earth for protection. As a last resort, even if there's no basement or storm cellar available, you could get some limited fallout protection by improvising a shelter on the ground floor of your home. Use a hallway, an inner room, or large clothes closet, away from outside walls and windows. With doors, chests, trunks, and boxes filled with earth or sand, you can create an enclosure large enough to live in for the short time of that first peak period of danger. If the inner space you've chosen is too small to allow room inside for all these shielding materials, place them against the other side of the walls, in the surrounding rooms. All these are last-minute measures, of course, for use only in extreme emergency if you just can't reach a regular fallout shelter. But it's better not to wait that long to make some preparations, particularly when it comes to supplies. Most community shelters, though not all of them yet, have been stocked with the basic requirements: emergency food rations, water containers, sanitation equipment, medical kits, radiation detection equipment. But even so, in a time of crisis, shelter living would be Spartan, none of the comforts of home. And there are things you'd better plan to take along to help ease that shelter stay: a battery-powered radio, flashlight and extra batteries, a blanket for each member of the family, any dietetic foods or special medicines your family may need for reasons of health, like insulin, heart tablets, antihistamines. If you have a baby, don't forget bottles, disposable diapers, cans of formula and special baby foods. And of course, if your neighborhood shelter's not stocked with the basic supplies, you'll need to take as much water and ready-to-eat food as you can carry. That's true of a family home shelter, too, for here you'd be on your own. So keep a 2-week reserve of supplies around the house for use in emergency. For shelter use, canned goods are best: soups, canned meats, all the pre-cooked foods, and packaged goods like crackers and wafers that don't need refrigeration.
Thanks, Danny.
And water.
There you go.
That's even more important, for you can't live without it. As a minimum, 3 or 4 gallons for each member of your family, and store it in tightly capped bottles or plastic containers. If the supply runs low, don't overlook all the alternate sources right inside your house. the canned fruit and vegetable juices on the kitchen shelf, soft drinks, milk, and ice cubes from the refrigerator, the 20 to 60 gallons in your hot water tank, and of course, all the water trapped in the pipes of your house plumbing system. In case of attack, simply turn off the main water valve in your basement to avoid having it all drain away if there's a break in the outside mains. Then, turn on the faucet located at the highest point in your house, probably the upstairs bathroom, to let air into the system. Then, draw the water as you need it from the faucet located at the lowest point. It'll be pure, drinkable, and free from fallout.
You can eat a whole
If
lot.
some fallout particles are on food that you've brought in from the outside, don't worry. They can't make it radioactive. Simply remove the particles, and you remove the danger. Just wash or peel the fruits and vegetables. Wipe off the packages or cans.
The milk, honey? All right.
For safety, it's better to make sure that babies or small children aren't allowed food or liquids that might be contaminated. However, in extreme emergency, thirsty people should not be denied water, even if it contains fallout. There's little danger that any adult could swallow enough to hurt him. It'd be like trying
Here we
to
are.
swallow sand.
Here, honey.
Of course, we've only skimmed the surface here of things you need to know and do. But you'll find everything covered in fullest detail in this Citizen's Handbook prepared by the Office of Civil Defense. It's titled, In Time of Emergency. It deals with natural disasters as well as the dangers of enemy nuclear attack. And you can get a copy from the Civil Defense Office of your own local government. Read it. Study it. And above all, keep this quick checklist of emergency actions in mind. First, know your local emergency action plan. Hundreds of cities and counties have prepared and printed specific community shelter plans, complete with maps and detailed instructions, telling every resident where to go for the best available protection against fallout. Make sure your family knows the plan, where the nearest shelters are, and how to get there in time. Second, keep a stock of emergency supplies on hand. Foods that require no cooking,
I guarantee
enough drinking water and other liquids, special medicines, radio, flashlight, blankets. And if you're planning to use a home shelter, don't overlook the problem of sanitation. Lay in a metal container with a tight-fitting lid, some plastic liners, and household disinfectants. You'll need them for disposal of wastes and prevention of disease, to keep your family healthy through its shelter stay. If attack seems imminent, take precautions against fire. Close doors, windows, Venetian blinds. If you don't have Venetian blinds, cover the windows with household cleaning powder, aluminum foil, whitewash. For even in the fringe areas, miles away from any nuclear explosion, the heat wave could ignite trash and dry wood, set fire to your home. Have some basic firefighting tools on hand, especially a good fire extinguisher, and keep your garden hose connected. Unless your local authorities advise otherwise, fill the bathtub and other containers with water. For under enemy attack, the fire department may not be available. You'll have to help yourself. Above all, make sure you know what your local attack warning signal is. There are a few exceptions because of special local conditions, but in most communities, the standard attack warning is this. A wavering, undulating sound on the outdoor sirens lasting 3 to 5 minutes. Or a series of short blasts on whistles and horns. And when you hear that sound, believe it, an actual enemy attack has been detected. Don't reach for the phone to find out what's happening. The lines need to be kept clear for official emergency use. And you need to find shelter promptly. If you're caught in the open, If there's a sudden flash and you feel warmth at the same time, don't look at the flash. Move. Take cover instantly, behind a tree, or a wall, in a ditch, or a culvert. Curl up on the ground and cover your head with hands and arms. Stay there till heat and blast waves have passed. Then get to shelter before the fallout starts falling. Then turn on the radio. The emergency broadcast station serving your area will be bringing you news, presidential messages, civil defense instructions. You would not be alone. In many shelters, you'd find friends and neighbors who have been specially trained in shelter management, radiological monitoring, medical self-help. All across the country, the Civil Defense Monitoring Network would be measuring and reporting fallout conditions. And from the state and community emergency control centers, your own local authorities would be directing life-saving and recovery operations, keeping in close touch with each shelter. Just follow their official instructions and stay in the shelter till they tell you it's safe to come out. All these things are easy to remember and fairly simple things to do. None of them cost much in time or effort or money. If nothing ever happens, if the world maintains its sanity and enemy attack never comes, that time and effort will still have been well spent. For the better, both we and the nation are prepared. The less chance, really, that anything will happen. And if they ever prove needed, they could save your life in time of emergency.
Signal sent, Mr. Sharp. Have a pleasant evening.
Good evening, Mr. Sharp. What is your desired destination?
Server, take me home.
I took the liberty of checking the grocery items in your home.
Yeah?
You're running out of milk and bananas. And your vehicle needs fuel. The nearest location with these items in stock is a gas station at Highland and Willoughby. It's on the way home.
I just want to get home and watch real-life car crashes.
I could always record real-life car crashes, part 2.
I'm really tired.
It would be better to do it now, rather than later.
Fine. Take me to the gas station.
Take the coins and the paper and the bills. Trade them for the hand that you cannot feel. I just want a piece of food, a scrap of sweet. It's legal tender, no electro money. It says so on the sheet. Right here. Candy bar.
Your account has been debited. 237, man. Have a nice day.
Ready to come out of your see-through cube? Hiding behind your little plasma tube? Information, conglomeration, infiltration, humiliation. Cashless society holds the key. Forget your name to save a fee. Number me, never be free.
Sorry, sir. You can't purchase that item. Wouldn't be the smart decision.
What are you talking about?
Doesn't fit your physician's dietary restrictions. I think it'd be better if you purchased something else.
Yeah, I know, but It's like I said, buy, store, control no more. Fuck your doctor, man. Live life. Hey, that's just the man trying to bring you down, brother. All right? I see, you see, he see, me see. And you make
Suitable substitute would be the Smart Bar, as all the daily vitamin requirements for men of your age. It tastes great.
Well, I just wanted to...
Smart Bar, sir. Smart Bar.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for shopping at Gas and Go. Have a nice day.
Your lighthouse still glimmers hope. I can tell. And I know I seem crazy, and maybe really I am, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. Okay? Thank you. Here, take it.
No, thank you.
Hey, this is legal tender, man. It says so right here. Right here. They can't watch it, track it, follow it. Nor watch you, track you, follow you. Well, I know. Let's give them a card, right?
Yeah, well, how else is it supposed to work? How are they going to keep track of all the information?
You. You got nothing to lose but your government shoes.
Yeah, that's easy for you to say.
Well, not everything good is easy.
I have a lot to lose. I have a home, I have a job, I got this car.
A car, a bike, it's just another thing in my life, right? You're letting them make the choice in exchange for losing your voice, man. Some shiny beads and a piece of string.
Yeah, so they know what I buy. They give me 10% off every transaction.
Okay. Yeah, but how much would you pay, right, to get out of jail? All right, like, either comfort or hardship, slavery or freedom, and my actions are who I am. Hey, think about it, okay? You don't know where you are, right? I mean, sure, Big Brother put a GPS in my car, right? What's next to pass, a bug up your ass, right? I, for one, have no desire for the government to know what I'm doing, where I'm going, or what I'm eating.
It's just a card. Doesn't run my life. I'm a man, captain of my own ship.
Right. This is money. This is real, okay? This is plastic, try and deal, okay? Look, hey, take control or someone else will, all right? Think about it, paper, plastic. Just how drastic, how drastic, till the change fantastic, all right? Hey, what you got there, brother? Maybe more than you think, maybe less than you know, all right?
God damn it, he took my card! Hey! Server, open the door. Open the car door. Server, open the door. Server.
Possible theft attempt.
Open the goddamn door.
Welcome to Smart Service. Please insert your smart card.
Hello. Yeah. I need to report a robbery.
Welcome to Smart Service. Please insert your smart card.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. I don't have my card anymore. It was stolen.
That was an invalid entry. Please insert your smart card. I did not receive your response in the allotted time. Please insert your smart card.
That's what I'm trying to explain to you. I don't have my card.
Thank you for using Smart Service. Have a nice night.
Out here.
Think smart, act smart, be smart. Smart card, yeah!
Hey! Hello! Hey, can I get a little help out here? Hey, my smart card was stolen. Hey! Hello! Your mindless back home, would you look at me? Stop!
Your future is in our hands. Smart card, yeah!
Thank God.
Step away from the vehicle.
It's okay. It's not what it looks like.
Where's your smart card? I don't have it. It was stolen.
What were you doing to that car?
Ow!
So we got ourselves one of those radical cash cows.
Ow! Listen, you idiots. It's really very simple. If you just... Shut up, cow.
Finally.
Sorry to keep you waiting, Mr. Sharp, but without your smart card, of course, it took a little while to confirm your identity. I'm sure you understand.
I understand that I wouldn't have been in this mess if it wasn't for the smart card.
We at the Smart Corporation make your life as convenient as possible.
You're not a cop?
Technically, I am a special service agent from the Smart Corporation. We work hand in hand with the police to protect and serve the public's needs.
For Christ's sake.
Had we actually apprehended some sort of vagrant, I'm sure you, of all people, would appreciate the scrutiny to which he, or you, would be subjected.
What the hell is that supposed to mean? I didn't even do anything!
Well, actually, Mr. Sharp, you did. I see a man who disturbed the peace, vandalized private property. We even found currency on your person.
I can explain all that.
The beauty of the smart card is that you don't have to. Imagine how bad this would have been if you didn't have the smart card.
I can take care of myself just fine, thank you. I don't think I'll be needing the smart card anymore.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Can we make it up to you? How about we give you a ride home?
Yes, thank you. That's the least that you can do.
Okay. You just give these officers your address, and they'll see to it that you get home safe and sound.
My address is on the card.
How do you usually get home?
I say home. The car takes me there. I don't usually think about it.
You really have no idea.
At the gas station, I was on my way home.
Well, that's all right. We'll call your wife. What's her number?
I don't know. I say speed dial 1.
Your office number?
I don't usually call myself at work.
No, of course you don't. You're a busy man with a lot on your plate. That's why the Smart Corporation is in business, to take care of those details so that intelligent, busy persons such as yourself don't have to.
Right. So how do I know this won't happen again?
To ensure that this won't happen again, the Smart Corporation has created a new system. It will eliminate the possibility of losing your card. I urge you to give it some serious thought.
Fueling is complete. Please complete your transaction. Fueling is complete. Please complete your transaction. Fueling is... Thank you for using Smart Card. Have a pleasant evening. And remember, Smart Card is here creating your best possible future.
This is a film about rough terrain unicycling. Hello, I'm George Peck, and I'm going to show you the few basic skills and equipment you'll need for rough terrain unicycling. And then it's out on the road, so to speak, for a few rides close by. Why, you may ask, would anyone be interested in learning rough terrain unicycling? And what is rough terrain unicycling? By rough terrain, I mean any whole surface that isn't smooth, level, and wide. So rough terrain would be anything that isn't. That could mean steps, boxes, railroad tracks, rocks, curbs, slabs of tilted cement, mountains, snow and ice, dry creek and river beds. Just about anything that's not a gym floor probably qualifies as rough terrain. I got into unicycling 6 years ago because I read that it's good cross-training for shortboard windsurfing. I also knew that Stein Erikson, a great downhill skier and now coach, advocated unicycling as a cross-training activity for his skiers. Pretty soon I was having more fun cycling than I was windsurfing, mainly because I could cycle nearly every day. And when I have the time, not when the wind happens to be blowing. My experience with windsurfing has been that if I leave it for a year or so and cycle in the interim, I don't gain any windsurfing skills, but I don't lose any either. The constant challenge of cycling keeps me in shape and keeps my learning edge fresh. In the 50 years I've been on this planet, I've done to varying degrees: downhill skiing, cross-country skiing, whitewater kayaking, ocean kayaking, mountain biking, mountain climbing, and shortboard windsurfing. Certainly rough terrain unicycling doesn't have the glamour and the speed of some of these sports, but it also doesn't have some other things that they have, like high entry costs, the risk of injury, the logistic hassles, or the confluence of rare meteorological phenomena. You can cycle inside or outside, from your car or house. You can cycle winter or summer, rain or snow, mountains or beach, forest or city. You can unicycle virtually anywhere you have flotation, traction, and room to maneuver. Equipment costs are relatively low. An entry-level cycle will cost less than $150. Protective gear about another $50. This will get you started. Eventually you'll want to beef up the stock cycle, but more on that later. Maintenance is minimal. There are no chains, gears, cables, sails, lines, or car racks to deal with. Just throw the cycle behind the seat and off you go. If you're flying, break the cycle down and put it in a box. I never leave town without it, literally. No matter where I'm going, flying or driving, I take the cycle with me, and I always cycle wherever I go. It's a go anywhere, do anything machine. So why unicycle? Because it's fun, provides an endless variety of challenge. It's adaptable to virtually any terrain, season, or weather. It's a good workout. It's good cross-training for other balance sports, and it's relatively injury-free. Overall, I would say that rough terrain unicycling is a cross between mountain climbing and bronc riding. There are short, intense moves of inches that may take days and days to work out, and there are 100 yards of beach cobble that will turn you every which way but loose. So let's turn now to the basic skills and equipment you will need to get started to enjoy and explore rough terrain unicycling. Basic rough terrain skills are riding standing up, hopping, rolling over obstacles, jumping, and wheel walking. In rough terrain, you will ride standing up over the saddle most of the time. Ride with one or no hands on the saddle. With the hand on the saddle pulling up and legs cranking down, tremendous torque can be exerted at the wheel. This technique can be used to negotiate hills, both up and down. Hopping is a very useful technique and one used frequently in getting over terrain without rolling. Your butt is over the saddle, hold the saddle with the hand or just with the legs. A 12-inch hop is max for me and the seat height I prefer. 10 inches is about max for me hands-off hopping. Whoops, well, some days are like that. Hands-off hopping is very useful because you can ad-lib a hop in there so quickly you'll be making save after save with this technique once it's yours. Rolling over obstacles is the most elegant way to get over small things, and the most noble way to roll is hands off the saddle. But you can roll standing up or sitting down, hands on or hands off. Jumping is a powerful technique that will open up lots of new territory. The rider is off the saddle and can compress right to the wheel going up or coming down. I'm up to 27 inches right now and will probably peak at 30 inches. A good jumper should be able to clear 50 to 60 inches. Wheel walking is a good technique and exercise for soft or steep terrain. This is because wheel walking provides a lower effective gear ratio than pedaling, and it makes the going more interesting when it's too easy to pedal. Related and useful skills are squats, squat riding, one-foot riding, and balancing in place. Squats are just deep knee bends on a cycle. Put your butt right down on the wheel, and it's good training and limber up for jumping. Squat riding is a real quad burner. Put a couple of 100 feet in at the beginning of a ride to get the blood moving. One-foot riding sensitizes the rider to the dead spot in the crank throw. At the pedal vertical position, there is very little torque available. A rider must learn to scooch through this position with deft weight shifts. One-foot ride whenever possible and learn both sides. Balancing in place is very useful technique. In rock and crud where you need a second or so to collect your balance, select a route and go for it. Also deer gear for jumping, since you need to carefully appraise matters before launching those tender body parts at rocks and logs and such. Protective equipment is vital to fun and injury-free riding. Gloves with palm pads are required. Always, always, always. Make the palm pad either as just a square palm insert or for the whole hand. To make an insert, lay the glove over a 3/8 foam pad, draw the outline and cut it out. Wrap it with athletic tape to make it stay in and feel better. If you're worried about fingertip protection, insert fingertip splints available at some drugstores. Elbow pads are required for rock and ice. Knee pads are mandatory for jumping. These pads are not truly adequate, but are the best of what is available. A back pad is always nice. This is a windsurf mask protector, but anything will do. A starter pad can be as simple as newspaper rolled up and taped or stuffed into a nylon bag. For big rock, I use a mask pad beefed up with a kitty litter pan bottom and another layer of foam. Shoes should be light, flexible, ankle high, and with some armoring in the toe. They must have a heel. These high-techs are just about right. Notice the wear on the ankle cuff, but for the shoe, this would be coming out of my ankle. Choose a platform pedal as wide as possible. Since you'll be standing on the pedals most of the time, a broad pedal provides more comfort and control. Bear traps are too fragile and too hard on shoes. They'll wear out a shoe in 60 to 100 hours by cutting through at the arch. Use them only when necessary. These Shimano or Graphex platforms don't clean as well in snow and mud, but are good overall, they last well, and don't wear out shoes as quickly. These seats are all covered with nylon-backed vinyl. This is a material commonly used in boat canopies. It is extremely tough, and even though you can't get it on a saddle shape without wrinkles, the wrinkles don't seem to matter. If you have a tender rear end, try a saddle with Spenco padding sewn in. It's more comfortable, but the resulting seat is much heavier. Tires take a beating, so put on a good knobby. Keep inflation pressures at about 60 pounds. Never let it get below 40. Lower pressures increase the risk of pinching the tube against the rim when there is a forceful contact with an edge. This will give you two nice little simultaneous holes in the tube and a walk home. Rough terrain cycles come in two flavors, 24-inch and 26-inch wheels. The 24-inch wheel with 5.5-inch cranks is standard. This is a fine jumping bike and good all around for rolling and hopping. The smaller wheel makes it easier to maneuver in big rock. The 26-inch wheel with 6.5-inch cranks is a better rolling bike. The longer cranks give 20% more torque, and the bigger wheel gives slightly more flotation. And because of the alloy cranks, this bike is actually lighter than the 24-inch cycle. The 26 is a rolling beauty. This would be my cycle of choice for doing forest and mountain trails where rolling is the primary activity, and a factory-studded tire is available for ice and snow work. Overall, however, the 24-inch wheel is the most versatile. This is the bike that goes with me everywhere. Well, so much for basics. Let's get going. Cycles are great for exercising the dog, and a toss or two is a good limber up. This road doesn't look steep, but it has a 25% plus gradient. I've ridden logging roads, mine haul roads, and firebreak cat trails in Alaska, Washington, California, Oregon, and New Zealand. And this is about as sustained steep as a road usually gets. Much less steep is this ramp at about 16%, but look how easily the cycle handles this grade. I mean, we're not even touching the saddle here. My experience with hills has brought me to the firm conclusion that the unicycle is the premier vehicle for going up steep hills. The reason is that the effective gear ratio for a wheel is as low as you will find on any mountain bike. Plus, the rider's weight and handhold over the driven wheel provide for better traction and more torque. However, a mountain bike can freewheel to the pedal level position for maximum torque, whereas a unicycle must roll through the dead spot of pedals vertical to get back to the pedal level position. Despite this handicap, the unicycle is still more capable at going up steep terrain. Eventually, the gradient here becomes too steep for either a mountain bike or a unicycle to roll. Plan B is hopping. Take my word for it, hopping is a lot easier on a unicycle than a bicycle. Curbs are great for learning to roll over obstacles. I love curbs. You can't spend enough time on curbs. The basic idea is to launch off the rear pedal and land on the forward pedal. This unweights the cycle, allowing it to lift. Plus, your weight coming forward and down adds some real authority to the torque curve. Stairs are not particularly friendly terrain, but they are everywhere, so you might as well learn to deal with them. Wear all pads on stairs. Stairs can be dropped step by step or rolled as a whole bumpy incline. The object in rough terrain cycling, as I understand it, is to take on the biggest obstacle around that you can handle. This picnic table is in the way, so let's give it a go. It takes me 2 jumps to reach the top. A good jumper can easily make it in 1. The other object of rough terrain cycling is to make things as interesting as possible. This berm is too easy to pedal, but it's a reasonable challenge to wheel walk. Now let's begin a forest trail. The terrain here will be typical of forest trails anywhere. Lots of roots, steep sections, and a few bridges and streams. Hills should be taken standing up without holding the saddle. You can get tremendous torque by getting as far forward as possible. Watch out, because this puts you at risk for a dismount out the front. The closer you get to the edge of the balance envelope, the quicker you'll go through it. But you have to be at the edge to optimize performance, so go slow. Get back momentarily for obstacles and scooch over them with your hips. All of which is a good trick while leaning way forward. It's a skill that will take time and sensitivity to develop. This hill has a stopper root at the top, which can be either rolled or hopped. It's more elegant to roll the root, but my pedal position didn't work out on this trip and I'm too lazy to ratchet to the best pedal position, so I'll just hop it today. When a hill is too steep for hands-off rolling, it's time to grab the saddle and start reefing. You can get so much torque reefing, it's easy to break a wheel loose. Use the torque carefully, bearing in mind the traction available. Again, stay as far forward as you dare, be flexible, ready to back off to start a bump, and thrust forward to finish it. Someday I may get good enough to roll this section hands-off. We come now to the inevitable stream and no bridge. The cycle does very well in water, provided you can see the bottom. I have been in water to the top of the wheel, but generally avoid water above the bearings unless you like lots of maintenance. Rolling or sliding down rock or gravel berms is a matter of staying back, grabbing the saddle, and braking with lots of counter torque. In soft terrain such as sand or snow, turn the cycle down the slope like a snowboarder would carve turns. See, I told you steps are everywhere, but these particular steps are benign, so let's have some fun here. Going up 2 at a time is good jumping practice. Coming down 1 at a time, hands off, sensitizes the rider to staying in the balance envelope without holding on to the saddle. A desirable skill that pays off in general small rock work where you need both hands flailing for balance. Here is a good example of small rock. What makes this terrain difficult is that what you see is not what you get. The rock is loose and shifts constantly under the influence of the wheel. The preferred method of dealing with this stuff is to go slow and steady. Give yourself time to pick a route and to react to the unpredictable. Go directly over a rock whenever possible rather than around or between. A rock under the wheel is not nearly as squirrely as a rock being shouldered aside. Logs, pipes, or poles, like steps, are just about everywhere. Be careful. Before doing cylinders, make sure they are stable. Test for traction. Creosote poles are very slippery in hot or wet weather. These logs are good practice for forest work because some trails will have only logs for bridges. Now let's try some tilted stuff. These are dream slabs to work. They are stable, rough, and only moderately tilted. Route selection is still important, however. Balancing in place and hopping are the component skills. The only limit to what can be done in this type of terrain is adequate tire friction and room for the slope side pedal. A dedicated rider with good skills could do some serious rock work. Whole mountains would seem to be possible. Our route brings us out onto the beach. This particular section of small to medium rock provides endless fun. No route, no day is ever the same. This is where curb practice pays off. Rolling over to 6 to 8 inch ledges is mostly all that's happening. Balancing in place is important to slow and deliberate progress. Medium-sized rock provide good hopping grounds. Hopping is a fun skill, but work up to it gradually. Always test for traction and stability first. Taking off and landing from ankled rock is more difficult. Ease into the skill. Eventually, the beach turns into what I call big rock. I should be wearing a helmet here, so should you. No new skills here, just dancing with bigger rocks. Remember, what you're seeing is not about what I can do on a unicycle, but what you can do. As long as there is traction and room to maneuver, a unicycle will take you anywhere your skill allows. There are two things to know about rough terrain unicycling. First, the learning curve can be shallow and long, but not to worry. Joy in unicycling comes from the daily exercise and mental and physical challenges it provides. The improvement achieved on any particular day or plateau is less important than just doing it. Second, cycling is a grabber sport. Once you get into it, it won't let you go. Cycling gives you a chance to get outdoors virtually anywhere, anytime, get a workout, and meet a host of challenges. Like rock climbing, cycling doesn't always require a big chunk of territory to be interesting. But the cycle is no slouch at putting 10 to 15 miles a day on a forest or mountain trail. And it is compact enough to give you a good workout indoors. When you ride, no matter where you ride, always wear the appropriate padding. Currently available stock unicycles are not up to long-term use in rough terrain. These are a few of the dozens of axles I have broken from these machines in some 3,000 to 4,000 hours of riding, and bent cranks, and broken pedals, and seat posts, and seat covers. To put together a bike robust enough for sustained rough terrain work, some stock components must be replaced. The most important is the axle. The only two types of axles that have survived my riding are the Philwood four-shoulder taper and the Bullseye hollow splined axle. A reinforced seat post and seat will withstand the fiercest of reefing, and a nylon vinyl seat cover will give reasonable wear. Put on the biggest platform pedals you can find. The addition of these components will reduce failure rates to an acceptable level. Otherwise, it is simply not safe to venture into terrain like this without reliable components, especially axles. A broken axle is fairly catastrophic in any event, and this is not the place to find out more about it. As your ability to extract more and more torque from the cycle increases, so will your ability to fatigue a stock axle to failure. Steep downhills, hopping, and small to medium rock work will cause stock axle failure in 100 to 200 hours. Count on it. So after you've burned out your stock axle in mild terrain, replace it with a Philwood or Bullseye axle or equivalent. Now, it's okay to burn out a stock axle or two, but it's not okay to burn out yourself. Just remember that some people learn cycling skills very rapidly, and some people learn cycling skills very slowly. Even though I would classify myself more to the slow group, it hasn't diminished my enjoyment of the sport one bit. Don't let the apparent difficulty or lack of natural aptitude deter you. Get a cycle and get on it. Wear your pads and enjoy.
A growing problem among American youth is satanic and occult worship. Bored with drugs and alcohol and left unchallenged by the church, American young people are experimenting in increasing numbers with satanic worship and practices. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, before a crowd of over 10,000 who had gathered in the Tingley Coliseum, Mario Murillo brought one of the most important evangelistic messages of the 90s. In an anointed and fiery message, Mario skillfully exposed the deception of Satan in a message entitled Satanism Unmasked. At the conclusion of this powerful service, nearly 1,000 young people streamed forward to receive Christ and publicly renounce Satan.
Make a joyful noise to the Lord here tonight.
You know what I think would be the most important thing for you to do now is remain standing just a moment. Take someone by the hand. Everybody take someone by the hand. Because it's Halloween night, none of us are thinking about going to bed early tonight. But we're not going to be here that much longer. In fact, it's going to be over before you know it. Whenever I am in an auditorium and I've been assigned the task of speaking to today's society, I can do it intellectually because I spent 10 years at the University of California, Berkeley. If you were wanting a lot of statistics about Satanism, I can give you that too. But there is something far more important that is going to happen right now. The most powerful force in the universe is the power of the Spirit of God to change a person's mind and spirit. And I want you to know, if you listen just for a second, that you need not leave. Don't leave. In fact, I don't know why I've said that, because nobody's leaving. There is a feeling inside of me that tonight I'm going to see with my eyes the greatest miracles that I have ever seen in all the years that I've preached. And I want you to be a part of it. But when I talk to you, I will give you information for your mind. I will prove. I'm going to be a prosecuting attorney against a scandalous whitewash job by the media on the issue of Satanism. But more than anything else, I'm going to speak from my heart to your heart because you were born for a reason. And I believe that you have a desire to be radical. You have a desire to be intense. And some of you have experimented with things because of that need to be so radical. And I'm going to show you what to do with all of that in a way that you never imagined you could. And I need everyone to help me. Now close your eyes. The power of God is real. The power of the Holy Spirit is real. And in this auditorium, this was once the Tingley Coliseum. It is now, like any temple of God in the world, a place where Christ moves and operates. And he wants to speak to you. Father, help me and give me the words that I need to speak. Give me the understanding and the clarity of mind so that the words that I say go straight to the heart and the mind of people. And I ask you to do this all in the name of Christ. Amen. Now everyone look at me, please. I take what I do very seriously, although I do have a sense of humor. You would never interrupt a doctor operating on somebody, a paramedic giving CPR to a heart attack victim. Neither do I believe that if a man is under an anointing that is empowered by God to speak, that you should interrupt him, because somebody in here, it is life and death for them, and it is possibly for you. So I want you to greet the person beside you as you're seated with these words, that what is going to happen is important, and listen real good. And thank you, and you may be seated. Thank you so much. Now, my brother, please don't interrupt these proceedings. Thank you. Now, everybody look at me and smile right now. How many of you are glad you're here? Wave your hand at me. I'm telling you, there's so many thousands of you. Now, I'm going to ask that as much as possible, the ushers help me by having everyone, I'm going to speak for only a few minutes, and I'm concerned about the people that have come to listen. So I want you to have a seat and not move around, and we're going to be very strict about that. I believe that the forces of evil would love very much for you to have heard music tonight and not a clear, direct spoken word to change your life. I'm going to give you two reasons that we had this event tonight. Number one, because I frankly believe with all of my heart that there is some good news that is long overdue for Albuquerque. Albuquerque in the last few years has had an unrelenting cycle of crime and violence and pornography. This I have found from sources that live here. The quality of your life, the quality of school life and home life is deteriorating rapidly. It is not something that the American public knows about, for they don't identify that with Albuquerque. But mysticism and supernaturalism are a part of your culture and have been ever since the beginning of this land. The other reason that we are having this event is not only to give good news, but I didn't know before that Christmas did not begin as a Christian celebration. Neither did Easter. The spring celebration of Easter was a pagan celebration that the church wisely understood that when cultures were born again, they needed to have a celebration for them that would be for the resurrection of Christ, that said, look, while the world is partying in fertility rites, you need to be celebrating that Jesus rose from the dead. Likewise, Christmas began as a midwinter pagan celebration in Europe. And it was a very wise man, Martin Luther, the father of the Protestant movement and a great thinker, who said we need a midwinter celebration so that the Christians will not be tempted to paganism at this high point of celebration, revelry, and immorality. So then he said, let's celebrate the birth of Christ. And he was the father of Christmas. Now the thing that I want you to know is we stole back Easter. And we stole back Christmas as the church. And tonight, frankly, I'm here to steal Halloween and make it a Christian holiday. The experts are killing us. And I'm going to tell you from the bottom of my heart that I lived all of my life in one of the most disaster-ridden cities in North America, San Francisco. And I watched a misguided government and a misguided media botch an opportunity to save thousands of lives, and they blew it. The experts believe that unless there's hard proof of a problem, don't act. part of the reason that they feel that way is so that you will think they are smart, because after all, if there was a problem, wouldn't they know about it? Now I'm going to tell you that here is exactly, these are famous last words. Television violence does not create violence in real life. The fact of the matter is that now the majority, the overwhelming majority of all broadcasters, all of the people in the print and media of television now agree, we blew it. Violence on TV creates violence in the home and in the streets. Famous last words. Pornography does not produce child abuse or assaults on women. The fact is that now, reluctantly, America has accepted the fact that the experts were dead wrong. They said it didn't do it. Now we know it does. In our liberated era, they thought that pornography would produce less rape, less problems. You know, we've got more than ever, and they know it's connected. Third, famous last words in San Francisco, the gay lifestyle does not spread AIDS. It was 10 years before the city of San Francisco took action to close the bathhouses in the city of San Francisco. I want you to listen to the words of the media. Privacy is more important than scare tactics. This is a heterosexual witch hunt. The rights of individuals must be protected at all costs. Now, by all means and insight, there are 35,000 people in the greater San Francisco area that have AIDS. The majority of them without a cure will be dead by the year 2005. Number 4, famous last words occurred in the city of Albuquerque last Sunday. A sociologist responding to this event and experts said, it is hard to connect any youth violence with Satanism. Why am I standing here? Because I believe that 1 out of 5 of every child stolen in America is being abducted by a Satanist for a ritual of one kind or another. Listen to me, if Satanism, and I believe there are millions that have made satanic worship a way of life, I believe also with all of my heart that there has to be a reckoning with the fact that we in America can no longer rely on the press or the media or the experts to tell us what we ought to do with our community, our schools, and our future. A sociologist was quoted in last Sunday's paper saying, very little youth crime, according to the experts, is attached to Satanism. That is because they are using the Braille method to uncover what's going on. Los Angeles knows that Satanism is real. For the first time in the history of the United States of America, a major city has created a law on the books to outlaw animal sacrifices because the incidence of it is so great. There is so many serial killers that admitted that satanic worship and voices that they heard was a part of their life. We have so many musical artists now that unashamedly, one of my best friends is a young man who has been radically saved. His name is Jeff Fenholt, who played Jesus in Jesus Christ Superstar. He told me that without witchcraft, without Satanism, that his group, Black Sabbath, would never have reached the heights that they reached. They required witches and incantations for everything. I'm going to tell you that I believe that there are at least 5 million youth in the United States that are avowed satanic worshipers as the moment that I'm standing here. I'm going to take a moment and tell you that I'm not going to revel in statistics, but there is something that you must know. I am not out to get the Satanist. I'm out to get Satan, but not the Satanist. And you know what I feel is this. There are a lot of reasons why you would never listen to a preacher or respond to him. One of them is this, that there is this feeling that when men stand up to speak, that they don't know what they're talking about, first of all. Second of all, that what their goal is to get you to cut your hair and vote Republican. Third, that there is a great feeling that they are mad at your fun. The feeling is, we are mad at your fun. Do you know what I love, and I think it's wonderful, is the upbeat music and the rhythm and the movement of youth in the church today. You know what? I'm going to tell you, you're going to get mad at me, some of you, but I'm glad it's loud. I'm glad it's bold, and I'm glad it's exciting. And I'm going to tell you why. Because the young people of this generation need to know that the moment you find Christ, you don't become a dried up pickle in a jar that's checked out of life, but you have a good time, my man. You have an awesome time in the Spirit of God. Somebody look at somebody and say amen. I'm not here to get you to shave your head and sell flowers at the airport. We must understand that Satanism is not only real, but what it really is. And then tonight, in part 2 of this, we're going to tear several masks off of Satan, one at a time. How many of you will be here for that? 1, 2, 3. Watch this. If Satanism is not real, I've got a question for the media, and I'm going to finish this portion. According to Jerry Johnston, a well-known evangelist, there was a letter that a young boy, Tommy, wrote to Satan. In it, he said, "You promised me power and demon power if I were to take my own life." He murdered his grandparents and then shot himself. I'm here tonight as a parent because I am familiar with 2 Christian leaders whose children were watched for days and finally molested by Satanists. And the parents were unprepared and unprotected. Now that gets close to home. That gets very important. But we need to understand something. We cannot have a rally like this to foment hatred against people that might believe that Satan is greater than God. But we have a rally like this to help clear the air on a vital misunderstanding. And this is it. Listen carefully. The American way of life is very cruel. How many of you have seen that ad on TV that shows the fried egg and says, "This is your brain on drugs"? Any questions? And they think that by doing that, they will turn millions of young people off of drugs. Hasn't worked. And the reason it hasn't worked is because a lot of people forget. Some adult will write an ad like that and suppose that being young today is a matter of just easy rituals and routine. Life today is empty. It is cruel. All of our leaders have failed us. We have learned by example that most politicians are on the take. Every day we uncover some other lie, some other adultery, some other filth that is going on in government or in legal terms. We find out that all of the authorities we've trusted, we are told every day that the ozone layer is being depleted, that there are 44,000 warheads, that we won't live to see tomorrow, and the institutions youth believe have failed them. So we live in an era where people feel wrecked, and life is cruel to them. So it is important to say, look, instead of saying, "You nasty person," with your pentagram and your tarot cards and your paganism, we need to stop and realize, have we driven them to this? Have we so unloved them? I want to tell you about a young man named Tommy. And I told you about one Tommy. I'm going to tell you about a second one. He lived in the Monterey Peninsula. His father is a Marine sergeant. And all of his life, his dad said, "You never, ever are going to call me father. I don't love you, and you're never to tell me you love me." One day, the boy, when he was young, he said, I said, "My dad, Dad, I love you." And my father socked me. And he said, "I want you to be strong." Of course, he became a drug addict. He ran away. At the age of 17, he began to sell himself on the streets of San Francisco. And this report that I'm giving you, is it an isolated case? I believe that there are millions of young people whose parents, in their greedy and they're empty and selfish, latchkey mentality have thrown them out. And then on TV, their values have been thrown out. What do you call it when children gravitate toward Ninja Turtles? But a generation that says, give me a hero, give me something. And what we've done is we've lied. We've told them about Milken and his junk bonds. We told them about the senator that's up in Boston that had a male prostitute as his lover. We know again and again and again, there are no ideals. And the devil comes along and said, look, I'll give you some rebellion, some righteous, mighty, powerful rebellion. And you get ripped off. Satanism began thousands of years ago. This is for the experts that need some facts. Satanism began thousands of years ago in the Garden of Eden. There are hundreds of different, and there was one group here, and I want to tell you I love you, but you need to be corrected. There's a group of pagans in the city of Albuquerque that say this: we are not black artists, black witchcraft artists. We are not into black magic, we're into white magic. And they say to me, we are different than those that you're talking about that worship Satan. You see, we worship trees. We worship the earth. Well, you don't understand. Biblically, those are on the even keel. It says in Romans 1, they took the creation and served it rather than the God who is to be righteous forever. Now, I'm going to look at you all and tell you that white magic and black magic is like talking about white AIDS and black AIDS. They both lead to the same way. Let me tell you, it isn't evil because it draws you towards Satan. It's dangerous if it pulls you away from God. And that, my friend, is where we'll jump to the next part. With cynicism everywhere, what happens? A society loses its way. Everyone in my generation remembers the day that John F. Kennedy died. We were absolutely full of uncertainty and anxiety. There's one thing that we have in history. Paganism and Satanism always arrive when the values of a society have gone down. 500 pastors in the San Francisco area one time asked me to talk to them after Jim Jones in 1978 had murdered 700 people in the jungle of Guyana in this cult. And they asked me, Mara, how could this have happened? I said, it happened because there was an emptiness. It happened because there was a void. It happened because nobody had any love in their heart. And then I said, you need to understand that before anyone went down to the jungles with this cult leader, first they tried your church. And instead of telling them about a supernatural God, you're talking about liberation theology and Marxism and humanism and stuff that doesn't matter at all. I don't believe that young kids ran into Satanism because they're evil, but because they were stripped of values and meaning, and even their churches betrayed them. What we should have been saying is not, God is way off there, and the gifts and miracles stopped when the apostles died, and politics is more important. These young people of today don't want to hear that. They want to know about a God that can heal their body, change their mind, and make them alive right now. Let's go. The one thing that matters most to me tonight that I get across is this, is that we've gone through 3 phases. Revolutions, if you will. The first was the drug revolution in the 60s to the mid-70s. And I'm going to set the stage of how Satanism came to the forefront. We had a generation that did drugs, and they were all excited about drugs. It was the cure-all. All revolutions begin that way, with something they believe will work. That revolution gave us what is now known as the blown mind, the fried egg. The next one was the sexual revolution. Everyone thought it was wonderful, and it is the prerogative of every generation to believe that they personally invented sex. The result of that generation was AIDS, but it's not over yet. The third revolution is here. And that third revolution, my friend, is the occult revolution, and the result of it is something that a reporter one day laughed at me about. He looked at me and he said, "You've got to be crazy. What are you talking about?" I said, "Demon possession." He said, "What is demon possession?" I said, "You don't know what demon possession is because you have never seen a demon-possessed person." You know about it, and you heard about it in Scripture and a few theories here and there, but if you ever look into the eyes of a person who is owned by a satanic spirit, you will never forget it as long as you live, and I did in 1974. In a meeting on the campus of the San Jose State University campus, a young man interrupted the meeting and ran down the center aisle, screaming as though he were on fire. Now, I've seen people run over by cars. I've held a young man that died in my arms who was shot. I've been able to be at the bedside of people in untold misery. And you can take heroin addiction, you can take burn victims, you can take anything, and you will never see the torturous pain of the eye of someone that is demon-possessed. And I never forgot it as long as I live. For he ran down to the front, fell on the floor, and something began frothing forth from his mouth. And his eyes, he could not put into words the pain that he was in. Malevolent evil controlled him, and he writhed on the floor. I'm standing there terrified. Nothing in Bible college prepared me for this. You don't call the psychiatrist. Say amen, somebody. You don't call the sociologist. And I'm standing there paralyzed, not knowing what to do, when suddenly Jesus spoke to me and said, go down and kneel by that young man, for greater is he who is in you than he that is in the world. There I was, on my knees beside him. I didn't yell, I didn't scream, for the anointing and presence of God was there. I put my hand on him and I spoke into his ear. I said, you evil spirit from hell, I bind you in the name of Christ. I command you to come out of him and leave him alone. And the moment I said that, this young man that was in horrible pain fell limp before me. I was still terrified. What was once an agonizing dead young man now was a weeping young man who began to recount a story of voices and practices and a lifestyle that began with curiosity and dabbling. And now there he was, and he told me, I have never had control of my mind since that moment. And he stood there and he started weeping. And I said, let Jesus come into your life right now. I know what you've been searching for. I know what you wanted, and it is found in the power of the gospel. And sobbing, he prayed that prayer, and the healing of God came in him. And I'll tell you what he became as a child. I'm going to look at you right now and tell you this. Satan is using 3 lies on you. And they began in the garden, and they are the tenets of faith of Satanism. And everybody, please listen. It won't take long. You remember what he said to Eve? He said, if you eat this apple, you will become like God. Eating this will make you wise. There are 240 mystical religions in America. We think of Satanism as that which has pictures of Satan, worship of demons, and yes, indeed it does. But there is an aspect of Satanism we refuse to accept, that Satanism itself is the heroin of addiction to the devil. And tonight we begin with the marijuana. The marijuana is the New Age movement. It is Eastern mysticism. It is the idea that through a diet and through self-effort, I can find a better self without realizing that mankind, because of sin, is cursed and separated from God. Nothing you will ever eat, whether it be brown rice from a Grecian urn or environmentally safe, big green health food, nothing you will ever do, no diet, no blood that you drink, nothing you will ever put in your body will break the curse that's on mankind, the kind that is creating the Middle Eastern war of today, the kind that has caused the rape and the mayhem. Man fell, and we've been separated from God. Our remedy will not come from a Ouija board, a pentagram, or anything that Shirley MacLaine has to say. And we lump them together for one reason, that the devil said, you bite into this apple and you'll be made better. And then the second thing, she said, no, I can't, for if I do, I'll die. And then the devil created the doctrine of reincarnation. You'll come back by saying, if you eat this, you will not only not die, you'll come back in a better form, a quantum leap. A young man in Maine that was a demon worshiper walked into a lake and drowned himself. And the note he left was, 1,000 demons will be under my power if I but take my own life. But it's mingled in so much. The third aspect of Satanism is the teaching. that you will eventually become like God. And I want to take a moment and make you understand this. Satanism believes, mysticism believes that you can, by a diet or a ritual, improve yourself or gain power. Many people were sent here and said, I'm going to sabotage that meeting because Satan will give me more power if I do it. And some strange power stopped you at the door. And now you're sitting here listening with an open heart. And I'm going to tell you something. Secretly, we know that the reason we want power is we are created as God's children. Die, you'll come back in a better form, a quantum leap.
Can a witch cause cancer? Can a witch place her image on a tumor? Yes. And you will see it next on this edition of It's Supernatural.
Centuries have come and gone, offering wisdom and understanding throughout the ages. Today, there should be nothing beyond one's power to discover. And yet the strange, unusual, and mysterious world of the supernatural defies understanding. Stay tuned for a unique and powerful investigation into a curious, undiscovered universe, only on It's Supernatural.
Hello, I'm Sid Roth, your investigative reporter. I'm here with Joan and Bob Nast. $6 million. Counterfeited. Caught. You look like such a nice couple. What are you doing counterfeiting $6 million?
Well, Sid, I figured if the government could print it and it's not worth anything, I might as well do the same thing.
But didn't you think you might get caught?
I didn't even think about getting caught.
Joan, did you know what he was doing?
Yes.
Weren't you worried for him?
No, because we were hanging around with people that the spirit of greed was upon them. We were hanging around with a lot of people in the mafia and wild people, and the spirit of greed had come upon us. And so money meant nothing. It was just, it didn't make us happy.
Yeah, but how did you feel when your husband was caught?
Oh,
that's another story.
That's another story. That's another story. When he got caught, he was facing 60 years in prison.
60 years. I mean, 60. This should have put a little sense inside.
Then I woke up. Yeah. Then I woke up and said, now, what happens if I get caught? Well,
Do you have a nice, easy judge?
No, I had a judge that they called a hanging judge.
I thought that was just TV.
No. He had a handlebar mustache.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
You're sure he didn't step off of a Western?
Well,
no?
I thought he did. When I looked at him, I said, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And every attorney I knew.
You're a little light now, but you must have been shaking in your boots.
I was. I was kind of like oblivious to it. I knew I was going for sentencing. I couldn't imagine me sitting in prison for the rest of my life. But I was looking at 60 years. 20 for manufacturing, 15 for printing, 5 for conspiracy, and 15 for selling. It was...
Okay, the moment of destiny, and it's destiny.
Yes.
What did the judge say?
Well, it was a miracle. I'm standing before the judge, and he asked me how I pled, read off the charges, and I told him I pled guilty. And he looked down at they do an investigative report, and they looked down at my investigative report, and he's looking at it, and he's going through these papers. And all of a sudden, he looks up, and he said, close the book. And it was a book that they had on me for my investigative report. And he says, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I feel that you suffered enough. I'm going to give you 6 months in a federal penitentiary of your choosing. I could choose the penitentiary.
That doesn't compute.
No.
And this was not a little crime.
No.
So that's not too bad. How are you doing during these 6 months?
Well, I was having a nervous breakdown, but I didn't know it. All our parents had died the year before, all in their 50s. My sister was 25, she died. My daughter was not well, and I didn't like the world. I had many fears, but Bobby was in my life since I'm 14 years old. We're going together. And when I heard that he was going to be taken out of my life, even though it was 6 months, I think that's when I went off the deep end. And I just turned more to drugs, more to drinking, more to, I used cocaine every day. I didn't know the Lord. I didn't know God loved me. I had no one to turn to, and hanging around with the people that I hung around with, I didn't have any really close friends. He was my only friend. So I felt very alone. So when he went away, I was very suicidal. Very suicidal.
How addicted were you?
I used cocaine every day.
That's
every day.
addicted.
Yeah, every day. I didn't think I could sell a house without it. I didn't think I could be a social person without it. I loved it. I loved the way that it gave me that false security. I loved the way it made me feel.
Bob, did you have any concern about your wife while you were in prison? Did you know how desperate she was?
Yes. Yeah. I used to use cocaine a lot also, but I was almost like a weekend warrior. It didn't bother me. I could use it Saturday and Sunday and, you know, party it up over the weekend, and then Monday I could just put it away in my drawer and go to work. It didn't affect me. But when everything happened when I was in jail, it took a while to realize what I've done and the way I messed up my life. And I sat there one night, it was about 9:15, and it was about, after I was in there for about a month, I used to call Joni every night and say, how you doing? You know, I used to call her collect, and she'd be crying, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And I guess the reality hit me, and I fell on my knees and I cried out to God, and I says, God, if you're really out there, you probably heard this a million times before, coming from a jailhouse cell.
Called jailhouse religion.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, Father, you probably heard this a million times before. I said, but I promise that I will not do another thing, another wrong thing again, and I'll serve you for the rest of my life. If you'll spare my wife from committing suicide, and if you'll spare my children the embarrassment that I caused them. And I put my head down and I cried. And I'll never forget when I looked down, it was 9:15 that night. And I didn't think anything happened that night. I just blurted it out. I had to get it off my chest. And the next time I called Joni, which was the next day, and I called her next night.
Joan, what was going on at that same time with you?
Well, the night before that particular night that Bob was praying, I don't remember coming home. I went to a friend's house, a big party. I did drugs. I had 3 teenagers who never did a thing wrong, thank God. And my 14-year-old daughter had been going to our church at the time, and she begged me every day to come, and I said, no, I'm not going. I'm not going to church. I'm bad. I'm probably going to hell like everybody else. That was my attitude. And she would beg me. But this particular night that I passed out in the car on the front lawn, my 3 children took me in the house, babysat for me. I got up in the middle of the night, broke everything in the house, broke dishes, wrecked the house, did everything. The next morning she said, either you come to church or I'm running away from home. So she dragged me to church.
How old was she?
14.
Well, why did you go to church?
Well, because she said that if I didn't go to church with her, she was going to run away from home. And I couldn't take another loss in my life. She was my only little girl. I had 2 sons and my little daughter. And she was serious. And she says, Mom, I'm not going to watch you kill yourself. With Daddy in prison and everybody else in the family dying, I'm not going to stand by and watch you kill yourself. You're going to church.
Well, how about you? Is everything falling apart around you? Probably not as bad as the Nass, but something phenomenal happened, and it happened to Joan at the same time it happened to Bob. We'll be right back after this word. Hello, YouTube. Mishpacha. Mishpacha is a Hebrew word. It means family. This is Sid Roth. Welcome to my world, where it's naturally supernatural. If you've been blessed by this show, please subscribe. Then click the bell so you won't miss a single episode of It's Supernatural. Hello, I'm Sid Roth, your investigative reporter, here with the Nass. Here Bob is in prison because he was counterfeiting $6 million and got caught. His wife is into drugs and into depression, and she doesn't even want to live anymore. And then at 9:15 p.m. in prison, there's nothing Bob can do about his wife and family. He's in prison. He's stuck. But he can pray, and he got right with God, and he asked God to take care of his wife. Well, Joan, your daughter came in and said to you,
She said, if you don't come to church with me, I'm running away from home. I'm tired of you using drugs every day, cocaine every day, and hanging out with your wild friends. She said, I'm not going to watch you kill yourself while Daddy's in prison. It's bad enough. You're coming to church. I said, I don't want to go to church. I know I'm going to hell. I'm very bad. I do bad things. I've been involved. And I said, I drink too much. I use all these drugs. I said, I can't go. She said, if you don't go, then I'm running away from home. At that moment, the shock of another loss, after losing my parents, my sister, and my great husband here in prison, I couldn't take another loss. So I said, I finally agreed after much arguing. So on December 7th of 1980, she dragged me into this church in Fort Lauderdale, Abundant Life, and I went in, and that was my night. That was not my night. When the pastor said, is there anybody here that needs Jesus? I went, might as well give it a shot. I've tried everything money can buy. I've tried cocaine. I've tried every drug out there, Quaaludes, you name it, I tried it. And I said, I've got nothing to lose. Why don't I give it a shot? I didn't know what it meant, but I thought I'll go forward. So I went forward, and when he asked me about Jesus, but the first thing he said was, do you know that God loves you? And I went, no, I never heard it said. No one ever said that to me. How important those words are, to know that God loves you, no matter what you've done, no matter where you are, whether you're in prison or you've killed someone or done something or had an abortion. It doesn't matter. God loves you. He might not like what you're doing, but he loves you. So when he said that to me, something started happening to me inside, and I didn't know what it was. And when he said, do you believe that Jesus Christ died for you? Do you believe that Jesus Christ rose from the dead? Do you believe? I said, I'm Catholic, so I know all that stuff. So he said, well then, if you just say a prayer, ask Jesus into your heart, he will forgive you of every sin, and you're guaranteed eternal life. Well, that sounded like music to my ears, because I never thought a person like me could make it to heaven. So I said the prayer with him, I accepted the Lord, and at that moment, I don't even know how to put into words that moment was the night that God himself touched me. I felt the arms of God, of Jesus, around my whole body.
How'd it feel?
It felt like if I could remember when I was infant in my mother's arms and in a nice warm blanket, you know, coming out of a bathtub and smelling like all powdery and safe and secure in my mommy's arms. That's how I felt at that moment. And I hadn't felt like that in years of our lifestyle. And I didn't think I could ever feel that again. I actually felt oppression leave, depression leave, fear. I was afraid of living, but I was afraid of dying.
What about the addictions?
Every addiction left me just like that.
All this instant.
Instantly. To this day, 21 years later, I never had a desire from cocaine again. I never wanted any of the drugs again, nothing. That night I went home, I poured everything down the drain, got rid of the cocaine, got rid of the Quaaludes, got rid of the liquor, just dumped everything, got rid of it all.
That's at 9:15 p.m. Her husband in prison says a prayer, and she says a prayer. Their life gets transformed. Bob gets out of prison, successful builder, everything's going good. They team up with Benny Hinn and go to his meetings and act as workers there. And then one meeting, a group of witches, real witches, walk into the meeting, and what happened to you?
Well, it was the first night of the crusade. We were going back to the hotel, and all of a sudden I became deathly ill. So ill that Bobby had to carry me
out of the cab.
In the cab, I went, something smells like a foul odor, damp, and like in a basement, a cellar. It was sickening. And anyway, when I got out of the cab, I don't remember much more after that. By the time I got upstairs, all night I stayed on the floor of the bathroom sick, and I really thought I was dying. And Bob said, you know, we haven't eaten, because we work hard at the Crusades, and you don't take time to eat. So we knew it wasn't food poisoning. And he said, Joan, this is spiritual. He said, there's been an attack against you. And a little bit of knowledge will kill you if you don't know about it. And we didn't know that much about it, even though we were warned. So anyway, the next day, I stayed sick. We came back to Florida. Within 5 days of the night of the crusade, a huge lump popped out on my breast. I went right away to have a mammogram from my doctor, said go for mammogram. The technician took a mammogram. She goes, oh my God, you better get to a surgeon, you have cancer. And wow, there's a witch on your mammogram.
A witch on your mammogram?
Mm-hmm.
How could that be?
Well, I don't know how it could be, Sid, but that's what showed up. That's directly from my mammogram.
That sure looks like a witch to me. And the technician said it was a witch. But look at the situation they're in. A witch caused that cancer to occur. She's desperate now. But what does she do? They want us to operate. She said, no, I'm going to a Benny Hinn campaign. She goes to the campaign. Benny prayed for her, and all the others prayed for her. What happened when he prayed for you?
Well, he didn't touch me. He just started walking towards me, and the power of God came through the room and slammed me to the floor. And when they picked me up, I said, Benny, I know God has healed me. I know it. He said, well, I'm not God. I can't tell you what to do. I said, well, they want to reoperate. They want to give me mastectomy next Monday. He says, God will give you the peace to know what to do.
Question.
Yes.
When they tested you, did you have any cancer?
When
No.
When they reoperated on me, I allowed them to. Because
They got the lymph nodes.
Yeah. The surgeon said, there's no way I can tell if there's cancer in your lymph nodes. If you will, I've got to go in and find out for myself, even though it appears
Was
that...
there?
No.
None in your lymph nodes?
No.
Did they remove your breast?
No. They couldn't find any more cancer.
How do you like that, witches? Ha! There's more power in the name of Jesus, in the blood of Jesus, than cancer has, or any curse has. I'm so glad I have intimacy with God. Wait till you find out the miracles that are going on now in their life. We'll be right back after this. Hello, I'm Sid Roth, your investigative reporter, here with the Nats. And before we find out this great miracle that happened in their life, I want to go to Janie Duvall in the control room. Janie, I mean, that picture is really something of that witch. I mean, that really looks like a witch.
When I saw that, I thought there was no way someone can just say, oh, maybe. I mean, it looks exactly like a witch.
Who's up next week?
A Jewish man named Ira Kelman, and this man was struck by lightning. 125 million volts of electricity hit him, and he's alive. But he's had other really incredible miracles happen in his life.
And I understand, but when that hit him, he was actually in a church speaking a very special scripture that I believe is what protected him.
He was talking about Psalm 91, the supernatural protection of God. But Sid, this man has seen even other miracles. He saw a baby that was dead come back to life.
That's my kind of miracle. Thank you, Janie. Now, Bob and Joan, we're going to, you've spent many years now helping children. You have a supernatural compassion. You go to children that are dying in hospitals. And one day, you had a vision from God, direction in your life. Tell me about it, Joan.
Oh, I was reading in the paper, being a realtor, I was looking for a condo for my daughter, and I saw that there was 5.5 acres for sale, not far from where we lived in Fort Lauderdale, for $400,000. So I said, hon, we have to go look at this property. He said, why? He said, Joan, we just lost a ton of money. We have no cash. We had a $500,000 home and a big boat, and that was secure. But we had no cash at this time, especially to go buy a $400,000 ranch. So, but being the wonderful husband that he is, he said, all right, let's go look, but we can't buy anything. I said, don't worry. We went out to the ranch, and it was an old, ugly ranch. There was potholes and Pepto-Bismol pink color, no roof, no porch, the fences were torn down, tractors laying around. It was ugly. It was very ugly. But as we entered on this long driveway to go up to the house, I'm telling you, it was just like with Peter, when a sheep fell from heaven. And I looked and I saw hay rides and I saw miniature horses and I heard children laughing. And I actually saw wheelchairs and children getting out of wheelchairs and off stretchers. but I heard laughter, laughter, laughter. And I'm looking to the left and the right, and I'm going, wow. Now Bob starts getting nervous, and he says, what are you looking at? And I went, oh, Bobby, something wonderful is going to happen here. He said, Joan, we don't have any money. And I said, I know, but this is wonderful. By the time we got to the top of the driveway, there was a man standing there in a black Porsche handing what I found out the owner. He was handing him like $25,000 to buy it that day.
So it's done. You can't buy it.
No, but God can. And when he wants something, he'll make it happen.
So what happened?
Well, we got out of the car, and he says, what are you doing? What are you doing? You know, I mean, my
She
nice...
kept me in suspense all the time. Sid,
God
trust me.
didn't talk to him for
Makes
2.5
for a good
weeks.
marriage.
Yeah, right, 39 years of it. So I walked directly over to the man and the other man, and I said, excuse me, you're the owner? And he said, yes. Well, I have a lot of jewelry. And I started taking off all my jewelry, and I put it in my hands, and I said, excuse me, to the other man. And I said, here, I come here in the name of the Lord. I said, we don't have any money, but we're buying this property. It's going to be called God's Little Acres for terminal and seriously ill children, and God's going to do miracles here. So take my jewelry. Well, the man didn't have any choice.
Lady, you got chutzpah. He's just got, what was it, $25,000 in cash?
And getting the rest.
Or your jewelry. Give me a break. What did he say?
Well, the man that was handing the cash got very angry.
I can understand.
He got very upset.
I can understand.
The man that was taking the money thought I was nuts.
I can understand.
And I knew it was God. And so he...
I didn't understand.
He didn't. And he held my jewelry, and he's saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I went, shh, it's God, it's God. So now the owner says to the other man, you can leave now. He said, come back tomorrow. She was here first. I wasn't there first. He had a list of people that wanted to buy that property in 1 week because you could build anything there. But I said I wanted to make it a ranch for terminal and seriously ill children. He later told me the reason he accepted my jewelry was because he was a rich man all his life, but he never did a thing for a sick child. And all these other developers who had the cash wanted to tear it down and make money with it. When I said that, he thought, well, maybe I could be a part of helping a sick child. So he held my jewelry. Bobby wanted to kick me. The man didn't know what to do, you know. And he said, take your jewelry back. I said, I really don't want it. All of a sudden, it meant nothing to me. And the rest just became miracle after
Let's
miracle.
talk about history right now. When someone goes on your property, what is the first thing they feel? Tell me a real person. What do they feel?
We had a UPS man delivering a package, and he walked up the driveway.
How long ago was this?
3 months.
Okay.
He walked up the driveway, and he said, what do I feel on this property? What do I feel on this property? And Joan said to him, you feel the power of God on this property. And she said, you better get right with God because you turned away from God 10 years ago. And the guy started crying, and he accepted the Lord.
Tell me one person that was physically healed on your property.
And tell about little
Joan.
Well, I think we have a picture of little Richie.
Richie, okay.
Well, we've had lots of miracles are happening. Little Richie's been in a wheelchair. He's 8 years old with cerebral palsy. And we have a picture of our little grandbaby who's 4 years old now. He was 3 last year. When I said to our grandson, Joshua, if you lay hands on the sick and say, Jesus, fix him, it'll work. So our little grandbaby went over, laid hands on little Richie and said, Jesus, fix him. Well, a month ago, they come to our ranch a lot, these people. And little Richie came up, they were wheeling him up our driveway, which is called Damascus Road. And all of a sudden the mother says, Aunt Joan, Uncle Bob, look it. And little Richie got out of his wheelchair and walked up. And he had never been out of his wheelchair.
What about the one with bone marrow?
Yeah.
Quickly.
Christopher, 8 years old, he came and he had a 1% survival chance of cancer of the bone marrow. We asked his parents if it was okay if we could pray. They said yes. They weren't sure if they believed, but go ahead. We prayed. The child shook. We knew God was touching him. And they said, what's happening? I said, God's touching your little boy. So I said, let us know when something good happens. We call it a praise report. And they said, okay. 3 weeks later, we got a praise report on our email. We took our son to Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York City to see if there was anything they could give him to slow this dying process. They retested him and couldn't find a drop of cancer in him.
Did you hear that? Witches, eat your heart out. Let me tell you, the power of God is so strong right now that whatever you need, when I say the name of Jesus in Hebrew, you are going to be set free, because there is greater power in the name of Jesus than cancer, bone marrow problems, heart problems, diabetes, greater arthritis, greater, here it goes. Here it goes. You ready? Get ready to receive. There's a faith transaction. Get ready to receive. 1, 2, 3. Yeshua. 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 Yeshua makes you whole. Go and sin no more. And I pray that in the name of Yeshua, God would put his arms around you just as he did around Joan. I pray that you would feel the comfort and the peace and the goodness and the love and the mercy of Yeshua. Can a witch cause cancer? Can a witch place her image on a tumor? Yes. If Jesus didn't, what happens when a high priestess of Satan tries to seduce a man and encounters a power that causes all hell to break loose? Next, on this edition of It's Supernatural.
Life after death experiences and angelic communications are on the increase. Terminally ill patients whom doctors have given no hope are unexplainably cured. People are being mysteriously protected from natural disasters. Sid Roth, your investigative reporter, examines this invisible world on It's Supernatural.
Hello, I'm Sid Roth, your investigative reporter. My guest was a high priestess of Satan. Most people think that this is just cartoons, a figment of someone's imagination. I mean, the devil is someone with a red suit and a tail and horns, and Flip Wilson says, the devil made me do it. But it's real. Lisa Gwen, how did you originally get into Satanism?
My motivation was I was raised in a very abusive home environment, a victim at a very young age. And that victimization will often make you look for power, for control, for ways to not become a victim anymore. You know, I remember at a very young age going, I will never be hurt like this again, and trying to find ways to assure that. And the enemy is very, you know, he's very capable. Satanic worship, the occult, witchcraft, ESP, all have a draw of power on them that was very appealing to me.
You had an abusive stepfather that you wanted to get the edge on, so to speak.
Right.
But how does a young child, I mean, how does a young child get into Satanism?
There are a lot of different factors. For me, I can tell you that media played a big role. I remember growing up, one of my favorite songs was about a woman who had the title of a witch in the song, and she could hold men spellbound by the look in her eyes, you know, to sing along with those words and to dream of having that much power over our abusers. You know, I had a friend who was also in an abusive situation. We kind of bonded together just to get each other through, you know. Two of our favorite shows were about a witch and a genie, television shows, and young, impressionable kids in situations of being hurt and abused all the time. Do you know what a draw it was to watch these shows and to wish that all we had to do was twitch our nose or blink our eyes?
Did you believe that when you were watching it?
You will believe anything. When you're in a situation where you're being violated, driven down, torn apart, and shredded emotionally, you'll grasp to any hope in any port in the storm, you know? And in desperation, you'll begin to believe whatever you can. With us, we went to our school libraries. Lots of books on ESP, increasing your ESP ability. Lots of books on witchcraft, you know? Our school libraries are full of books on the occult.
But you had an uncle that helped you on.
Yes, I had an uncle related by marriage who was the only adult for a long time that listened to me, that seemed to respect me. We would sit and have long talks because as I began studying about the supernatural and the occult and ESP and things of that sort, he would encourage me in those studies, and I had no idea he was a satanic priest. And so he was pretty much grooming me to be incorporated into that lifestyle.
In other words, you didn't know that he was a satanic priest? Would it have bothered you if you knew it?
Probably not. I probably would have found it very appealing, and more than likely.
So, did you reach a point where this power stopped your stepfather from abusing you?
Yes, I remember him coming toward me once, and I stood there and I visualized. By the time this happened, I had these lovely little imaginary friends, people that I could only see. You know how kids have imaginary friends. But my imaginary friends, I believed were so powerful. Actually, what it was spiritual forces that I had put myself into agreement, you know, contract with, that put an aura and a power around me that when he came toward me, and I was like, no way. And he literally backed away looking like this.
How old were you at that time?
I was 13. Took all that time, and I was already a Satanist at that time. I was initiated at age 12.
Now, most of what I know about that is you see on television, but that's not even the tip of the iceberg. How bad is Satanism?
It's very prevalent. You have to understand Satanism is not just active worshiping of Satan. Satanism is any religion or practice that fosters man's belief in himself and his separation and independence from a higher power, from God, you know, as we understand him to be.
No, but I read about sacrificing children. Is this for real?
That's for real. If you let your imagination run wild with you, a lot of what you believe and picture about Satanism is real. The problem comes with media. Media has been desensitizing people for years and years and years.
Do you think it's intentional?
I think part of it is, yeah. I believe that we have spiritual forces that are working daily to keep the general public doubtful of their existence, or, you know, one of the things that you'll do in a warfare is you'll try and make your enemy think you don't exist. You know, that way you can run ripshod over him, and he'll never, he'll never take up arms against you. And so Christians for a long time in media have been played as, you know, you always see Christians in movies standing up to the dragon and you know, spiritual people using spiritual powers of good, and they always end up, you know, getting chewed up and spit out. Meanwhile you have the witch, you know, trying to do good things with bad magic, and they're coming out on top. Or you'll see all of this gore displayed as far as the occult, and it's so portrayed in such an extravagant manner that people believe that's all it is extravagance, rather than realizing all of that is based in reality.
Well, why do they sacrifice a child in Satanism?
Satanism is predominantly based in old law, what you would call Old Testament law. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Goes back to the original sin of man, which caused an animal to have to die for God to make skins to clothe, you know, man, because he fell. Sin has always led to the shedding of blood, and therefore the shedding of blood has always been a way of paying for sin, okay? But also there's life in the blood. And, you know, every pagan religion in the world requires some kind of sacrifice. Some kind, whether it's animal, grain, person, you know? It's like what you give up for your God, it's all based in works. There's no grace.
Okay, Lisa, how did you feel when you saw a life being taken?
The first time, terrified. I blocked it out for years and years. Didn't recall it for a long time. Eventually, you get hardened to it. You realize that what you're doing is you have a need to achieve a certain power or a certain goal. And if one person suffers because of that, that's the cost. And
why did you have a need to achieve a certain power or a certain goal? Why did you have a need?
By that time, my whole identity came from what people told me I was and who people told me I was. My abilities. Once you get involved in the kingdom of darkness, it's like a dog-eat-dog mentality, gunslinger mentality. And so you progress, you know, from power to power to power, and there's always somebody trying to knock you out. But your whole identity is consumed with what you can achieve and how much power you can get for yourself and control over
What did you
others.
think would happen when you died?
I believed that I would go to be with my master in the kingdom of darkness and would be given a position of rulership there.
But certainly you heard about Jesus.
Jesus to me was a man who was stupid enough to find himself nailed to a cross. He was a good man, okay? He had a message from God, but unless people took advantage of his message, then they had no authority to stop you. And if they chose not to learn how to stop me, then they didn't have a right to keep anything I wanted to take from them.
Okay, a time came when they wanted you to have a child so that they could sacrifice it or use it in some way. Why in the world did you find this distasteful?
It's different when it's yours. You know, that's an ultimate thing. By the time they asked for that, I had had 2 major experiences in my life that had started me on an adventure of questioning everything that I had been taught for 20 years. All of the spiritual laws and principles that I had been taught that gave me the right, the legal rights to use and manipulate and control powers of darkness, I was beginning to question because I had 2 encounters that were not supposed to have been able to happen.
Like what?
The first was I was moved to another state. And that's often done. They'll position people in different states because they view it territorially. They want to, you know, maintain control in certain areas. So I was moved to this one state, and one of my assignments was to tear apart or destroy the ministry of this one man who had started teaching on spiritual warfare.
Why would you care about, if Jesus didn't exist, what difference does it make if you tear a minister apart or not? What's the big deal?
Because this minister believed in everything that Jesus did, and he was standing on spiritual laws that were superior to ours. For example, you know, a person could die a pauper if they never knew they had $1 million in the bank. Most Christians believe they have $1 million in the bank, they just never go withdraw it.
Okay, so this man was making trouble for your kingdom.
Right.
What was the objective? What did you want to do to this man, this minister?
We wanted to get him out of ministry, however that we had to do that, and if we couldn't do that, destroy him, kill him.
Had you or your friends done this with other ministers previously?
Yes. I will tell you at the specific time that I was sent to this one city, we had 5 other people positioned. One was in a major city where a major ministry fell as a result of that.
Yeah, how do you try to cause a minister to fall?
You look for weaknesses, for vices that you can manipulate, any sin, loophole, area, impropriety. You find his greatest source of counsel in unity. You know, if he has a partner, for a church, for example, you would look at the pastor and associate pastor, the pastor and the music leader. You know, find the strongest source of unity and you divide it. Divide and conquer.
Okay, what happened when you went into this particular church?
I went in, I kept sending people in first, you know, to go in what we called infiltrators. And they weren't coming back. Some of them were just not getting anywhere and were just too embarrassed to come back and admit failure because that's, you know, that's a no-no. I mean, you just don't admit failure or weakness.
So you now, at the level you're at, you're going to go in and take care of business, right?
Right, because I had people above me that were sitting on me going, why aren't you getting this done? Okay, so here I go in to handle it myself.
I'll tell you what, when Lisa comes back, we're going to find out how she took care of this minister. Don't you dare go away.
We will return to It's Supernatural right after this.
Hello, I'm Sid Roth, your investigative reporter. I imagine you didn't even run to the refrigerator to get some food during the break because my guest was a high priestess of Satan, and her job was to go into churches and cause the pastors or the leadership to fall, and just because the power in this one particular church was hurting her kingdom, and she had sent other people there to disrupt their church, and it hadn't been successful. So Lisa Gwynn, you decided you're going to take care of it. What happened?
Well, I went in under the guise of wanting help from this pastor who was doing so much counseling and helping people with occult pasts, and my encounter with him really shook the foundation of everything that I had been taught. I was taught that I served the ultimate power. Well, 5 minutes after I walked through the door, he began to pray to his God, and what that did to me was really wreak havoc. And it caused all of the demonic powers that I thought I had in control to pretty much come out, manifest themselves. The room began to fill up when he prayed. And really, they began to threaten me because I had taken them into a situation against a power that they couldn't stand against. And after that point, I began to question everything I'd been taught in Satanism about the power of darkness, because I had been taught that I served the supreme ruler in darkness, the supreme power.
Listen, if they're afraid of this Christian minister while you're alive, then how about the repercussion of what happens when you die? I mean, you thought you were assuring yourself a kingdom with Satan, but he can't even handle things in this life.
That's true. That's true. Satan's pretty much just a spoiled brat who knows his time is near, and he's pulling out all the stops to keep his little sandcastle kingdom from being washed away.
Well, so did this minister tell you to accept Jesus, and did you?
He did, but I didn't.
Why?
Everything that I knew about Jesus was no power, okay? All the churches I had ever been in, and a lot of the Christians I had known just were wimps. They said God was all-powerful, but they were always going through all these circumstances. They had no power in their life.
No. But at this particular one, there was obviously power. So why didn't you accept Jesus?
There's another factor involved in that.
What's that?
After a while, you are so used to the kingdom of darkness, you believe you are of the kingdom of darkness, and you can't change. It's like holding out,
it's like a homosexual that thinks he can't change.
Yeah, thinks he's chained, that there's no other option.
Yeah.
But there quickly became an apparent option. The Lord began to just put miraculous circumstances in my life. God began to orchestrate people that came into my life.
Oh, well, there was a person that came into your life. You were instructed to have a child for the sake of sacrifice, and you rebelled. You didn't want to do that.
Right.
And so you ran.
Yeah.
Weren't you afraid?
Yeah, I was, but I knew when I made the choices that I made, I knew that if I ever decided to leave, they would come and kill me, and I accepted the consequences of that. And
they sent an infiltrator. Tell me about him.
Well, I kind of fell in love with this guy that I thought was the cat's meow. He was everything I ever wanted. And after 6 months of living together, I discovered that he too was a high priest that had been sent just to keep tabs on my life. Confronted him with that knowledge, managed to separate myself from him, and shortly thereafter found out that I was pregnant. And he made it real clear, being a high priest, he said, that's my ticket. That child's my ticket. And faced with that option, abortion became my option, which he didn't take lying down. You don't do that. You don't abort the child of a high priest. And so he pretty much broke into my apartment the next day with some of his friends, destroyed just about everything in it, and beat me so badly I was told I could never have children. And at that point I ran. I ran out to the West Coast. I buried myself working for the motion picture studios, just trying to hide.
But you had a grandmother that didn't give up on you, that knew how to get in touch with God, and one day she called you.
Yeah, she would call me all the time through the years. I would be in the midst of sin and hear the answering machine come on, and I'd hear her say, "Day, Lord have mercy, child. I don't know what you've been doing, but I've been talking to God, and he told me to call you and tell you to stop." And I'd always be amazed at her timing.
When she said those things, what did you think?
I used to think, man, Grandma's she's got it all together. She knows about spiritual power. I never thought about the source of that spiritual power, But when she called and told me, she says, "I don't need to know everything you've been involved in, don't want to, but you need to find a man who believes in the power of God, a preacher or somebody, tell them what you've been involved in and ask for help." And I did, and got no results.
Why?
Well, the first church I went to, the pastor got kind of scared and said, you know, we don't want any trouble here, and showed me to the door. Because a lot of churches, although they affirm the power of God, they deny that there is a devil. They take half of the Bible and believe it and throw out the other half. The other pastor didn't believe a word I said. Still another one told me, well, what you have to do is you have to pray every day and go to church every week and read your Bible every day. And he was giving me all these step-by-step things to do. And I looked at him, I said, that sounds like ritual to me. And if I'm not mistaken, it's ritual that got me in this condition. And so I gave up.
But fortunately, you saw someone on television.
Yeah, I did. I started watching this minister on television, and he had a rather miraculous, powerful television show. And I found out he was going to be in the area, and I decided that I would go and check him out and see if what I was seeing on TV was true.
And?
The last meeting, I started to leave. And through just a series of events, and people chose to stay. And he opened his sermon that night with saying, I don't know if you've ever had the devil visit you in your home. And he began to share in an encounter that he had had with a demonic presence, and he had my attention. And I listened to what he said. He began to pray afterwards and called out miracles and healings and things. And he said, if you felt the power of God, get down here. Well, I didn't feel anything, but this person next to me pushed me out into the aisle, and I was kind of caught in the flow because obviously hundreds of other people had felt something, and they were all crammed in the aisle, and I was like, I had no choice.
Right.
So I ended up getting up onto the stage, and he prayed for me, and nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. And I walked off the stage, and here this teenager again that had pushed me out in the aisle to begin with came up and said, get back in line. You know, you came here for something, don't leave without it. And I told him, I said, no, I know where the line is. I crossed it, the point of no return, and I can live with that. But on my way out the door, here came this teenage boy again with his pastor, towing him toward me saying, help me pray for this girl. And that pastor confronted me with a question. He said, what do you want? If God or Jesus were standing here and asked you what you wanted, what would you tell him? And I began with my list. You know, I wanted to know what peace of mind was, what it was like to say the word beautiful again, what it was like to sleep more than 2 or 3 hours a night without things moving in my room or voices. I wanted to know what peace was. And as I gave him my list, I noticed that my face was wet, and I reached up and wiped these tears away. And I guess the shock really showed, because this preacher said what, and all I could stutter was, I didn't think they worked anymore.
Why?
I realized I was crying. I had said years before, the last time I had cried, I said I would never shed another tear when I was 8 years old, because I was falsely accused of something. And it so wounded me, and the person that accused me said, see, she's guilty because she's crying. If she wasn't guilty, she wouldn't be crying. And I viewed tears as something so horrible. But through those tears, he asked me, he said, if God could give you those things, would you give him a chance? And I said, certainly. I struck a deal with the devil once. I can certainly do the same thing for God and give him a try. And he led me in a prayer, acknowledging I was a sinner and asking the Lord to forgive me. And that began the change in my life. Everything from the next couple of days.
What happened that night when you went home?
Oh, I started driving from San Jose down to Los Angeles, and the more I drove, the drunker I got. I mean, I was getting queasy. I hadn't had anything to drink, alcohol, but I felt drunk. And I remember stopping to get gas, and I was washing my hands in the bathroom, and I started laughing, you know, just laughing. And I was so drunk and laughing so hard, I ended up throwing my wallet to the cashier.
But you didn't drink any alcohol.
No. All I can say is God was doing spiritual surgery on me, and the laughter was an anesthetic. He was using laughter. You know, the Bible says that laughter works good like a medicine.
Yes.
He was using that laughter to do a lot of healing inside of me, because I had gotten into Satanism from woundedness, you know? And you can't just quit something when you don't get rid of the cause. You know, you can treat the symptom, but if you don't get to the wound, you're just going to substitute another symptom, you know? So the Lord used that, and he began to do surgery on me. And for a couple of days, I was just drunk. When I made it home, I went to sleep at 11:30 in the morning, hadn't slept for 2 days, went to sleep at 11:30 in the morning, had never slept more than an hour or two a night. I woke up 9:30 the next morning, 22 hours later, in the same position I went to sleep in.
How'd you feel?
Still drunk. And it's been nothing but a change ever since. A great adventure of watching the Lord take me from step of freedom to step of freedom.
Yes, but you don't leave as a high priestess of Satan and just say, bye-bye, guys. I'm now a believer in Jesus. I understand the daughter of one of the top priests, or the top priest in the world of Satan, came after you. Tell me about that.
Yeah, they sent enforcers, which are people that will either kill you or take you back, to kill me. 3 enforcers. I found myself out in the desert, and I told them, in the name of Jesus, you have to let me go. They did. I should have told them, in the name of Jesus, you can't touch me, because I was pretty much a little bit worse for wear when they did let me go. But the Lord delivered me out of that situation. And, you know, and later I asked the Lord, how did they do that? Because I knew these men who didn't kill me were going to be killed for not fulfilling their assignment. And the Lord took me into the book of Romans, where it says that if we've, you know, been buried with Christ in baptism, if we've entered into the family of God, then we've been buried with him into his death. And that the old me, the only one they had a license to kill, was the old me. She's the one who did all of those things. And when I accepted the Lord, I became a new creation. And as long as I keep the old me dead, he will keep the new me alive. That's how I walked away.
The devil's got power. You know that.
Yes.
Are you telling me that he's got nothing compared to the power of God?
Nothing. He has counterfeits wrapped up in pretty packages that he's been using from the beginning of time to fool people into thinking that he's got the ultimate power, so that folks will never know that there is not just an ultimate power in God, but part of that power is the strength of love that God has for people.
If you do not know God, you don't know love. Yeah. If you do not know acceptance, you have no way of coping with what's going on in this world. To know God is to know love. To know God is to know the Jewish Messiah, Jesus. When you repent of your sins and you turn from them and you say, I believe Jesus died for my sins, you are washed clean, and God will live inside of you, and God will give you a peace like what you're experiencing right now. Some of you are experiencing the peace of God right now. As soon as we're through, you do business with the living God.